Chapter 1. The garage isn't silent, the garage had rules. Rule 1. If you came in, you worked. Rule 2. If you didn't want to work, you stayed out. Rule 3. Carter Jones did not explain Rule 1 or 2 to anyone. It wasn't that he'd posted the rules anywhere. He didn't need to. Over the years, the family had learned them the way you learn gravity, by experiencing consequences once and never questioning them again. Carter stood near the open hood of his car, sleeves rolled up, hands blackened with grease that had no real business being there. The engine didn't need work. It hadn't needed work in months. The socket wrench in his hand was more prop than tool, something to justify why he was out here, alone, with the garage door half down and the speakers humming to life. He adjusted the volume, not loud, just enough to fill the space. A guitar riff came through, familiar and easy, something from a playlist he'd been curating since before his kids were born. 80s, 90s, songs with hooks that didn't apologize for themselves. Carter inhaled slowly, then let the first line out. His voice wasn't tentative. It never had been. It was warm and steady, textured by age but not worn by it. He sang like someone who understood timing, who respected silence as much as sound. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to perform. He was just letting something out. The world outside the garage had been loud all week. Meetings, deadlines, school drop-offs and pickup windows measured in minutes. Susan's calendar intersecting with his in the narrow gaps where marriages survived or didn't. They were good at it, he and Susan. They didn't keep score. They didn't weaponize exhaustion. But even good lives accumulated pressure. The garage was where he released it. Carter leaned back against the workbench, eyes closed, singing along as if the song had been written for this exact moment. Middle-aged man, grease under his nails, no audience, no expectation. Just breath and sound and a sense of something like freedom. He never noticed the door. The door from the house opened quietly. Too quietly. 16-year-old Emma Jones stepped into the garage intending nothing more dramatic than grabbing a bottle of water from the extra fridge. She was halfway through a text, her phone angled just enough to keep her thumb moving without looking. She froze. It took her a second to register what she was hearing. Not the song that registered immediately, but the voice. She looked up. Her father stood with his head tipped slightly back, eyes closed, one hand resting casually on the fender of the car. He wasn't exaggerated or theatrical. He wasn't pretending. He was just singing. Really singing. Emma's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Her phone tilted. She didn't mean to record him at first. It was muscle memory more than intention. Thumb sliding, screen lighting up, the red dot appearing almost by accident. She stood perfectly still, afraid to breathe, as if any movement might break whatever spell this was. Her dad had always been quiet. Not distant, not cold, just contained. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, people tended to listen. But this was something else. His voice filled the garage without effort, strong but controlled, like he knew exactly how much of it to use and no more. There was confidence in it, not arrogance, something grounded, earned. Emma felt something twist in her chest. How did I not know this? The song ended. Carter exhaled, the sound of it unguarded. He opened his eyes and reached for the volume knob. That's when he saw her. "Hey, kiddo," he said calmly, not startled, not defensive, just present. "You need something?" Emma stared at him as if he'd just walked through a wall. She swallowed. "No, I mean, water. I was just," she gestured vaguely at the fridge. "Help yourself," Carter said, already turning back to the engine. "Careful, though. That thing sticks." She moved like she was underwater, grabbed the bottle, unscrewed the cap without hearing the crack of plastic. Her eyes never left him. "You sing," she said finally. He smiled faintly. "Sometimes. You're really good." He shrugged, like she'd complimented his parking. "Practice." Emma hesitated. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand. "Does Mom know?" He paused, just briefly. "She knows I sing. She doesn't know I sing like that." "Why not?" Carter considered the question genuinely. "Because it's mine." Emma frowned, not offended, just curious. "You don't want people to hear you?" "I don't mind people hearing me," he said. "I mind people expecting it." She nodded slowly, not entirely understanding but sensing the weight behind the words. "Oh, okay." She capped the bottle. "I'll go." "Love you," he said. "Love you too," she replied automatically, already backing toward the door. She didn't stop recording until she was safely in her room. That night, after homework and dinner and the familiar chaos of bedtime routines for her younger brother, Emma lay on her bed scrolling through the video again. The lighting was terrible. The angle wasn't flattering. The audio wasn't perfect. It didn't matter. Her friends were going to lose their minds. She hesitated only a second before posting it. By the time Carter turned off the garage lights and locked the door, humming softly to himself, his phone was already lighting up across the house. He just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. Posted. Carter Jones found out something had gone wrong when the barista at the coffee shop smiled at him like she knew a secret. It was a small place on the corner near his office, the kind that remembered orders and misspelled names with affectionate consistency. Carter had been going there long enough that the woman behind the counter didn't ask what he wanted anymore. "Morning, Carter," she said brightly. "The usual?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, polite as always. She slid his cup across the counter, then hesitated. Her smile widened, edging toward delight. "You've got a great voice," she added. Carter paused, fingers closing around the cup a second slower than normal. "I'm sorry," she laughed. "My daughter showed me last night. Garage concert. Very impressive." The words didn't land all at once. They arrived like loose parts clattering onto concrete. "Garage," Carter repeated carefully. "Yeah," she said. "On TikTok? Or Instagram? One of those. Anyway, made my morning." He nodded once, the motion automatic. "Glad to hear it." He took his coffee and left without another word, stepping into the cold morning air as if it might help clear whatever had just settled behind his eyes. Carter didn't panic. Panic had never been his way. But he did inventory. Garage. Concert. Last night. Emma. By the time he reached his car, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again. And again. He didn't look at it right away. He sat behind the wheel, coffee warming his hands, and stared straight ahead as if the answers might appear on the windshield. Finally, he checked. One missed call from his brother Mike. 3 texts from a coworker. A message from a number he didn't recognize that simply said, "Dude." Carter exhaled slowly and started the car. The office was no quieter than usual, but it felt louder. Conversations stopped when he walked past, then resumed with a different pitch. People smiled more. Some waved. At his desk, Tom from accounting leaned over the cubicle wall like a man about to deliver a punchline. "So," Tom said, "when were you planning to tell us you've been hiding a radio-ready voice for the last decade?" Carter set his bag down. "Morning, Tom. That's a yes, then." Carter met his gaze evenly. "What exactly have you seen?" Tom's grin widened. "Your daughter posted it. My niece sent it to me. Said, 'This guy sounds like he's been singing his whole life.' I said, 'Yeah, that tracks.'" Carter absorbed that. "Did it have a lot of views?" Tom tilted his head. "What's a lot to you?" Carter considered. "More than 20. Tom laughed outright. "Buddy, you passed that before breakfast." The word buddy landed differently than usual. Not unwelcome, just unfamiliar. Carter nodded. "All right, that's it," Tom asked. "No denial? No dramatic reveal?" "I sang in my garage," Carter said. "That part's accurate." Tom studied him for a moment, then softened. "You okay?" Carter thought about it. He really did. "I don't love surprises," he said finally. "But I'm not hurt." Tom smiled. "For what it's worth, man, that was impressive." Carter inclined his head. "Appreciate it." The rest of the morning unfolded with variations on the same theme. Compliment here, a joke there. Someone asked if he'd ever sung professionally. Someone else asked if he'd be willing to sing at the holiday party. He declined politely. By noon, the video had reached places Carter didn't have names for. Susan's coworker texted her a link. His neighbor across the street leaned over the fence when Carter got home for lunch and said, "Didn't know we lived next to a rock star." Carter smiled thinly and kept walking. Inside the house, Susan was at the kitchen counter, laptop open, headset around her neck. She looked up the moment he came in. "So," she said. "So," he echoed. She closed the laptop. "Emma showed me the video." He waited. Susan crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of him, eyes searching his face for signs of damage. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked gently. Carter shrugged out of his jacket. "You knew I sang." "I didn't know you sang like that." "I didn't think it mattered." Susan tilted her head. "Did it matter to you?" He thought again. That was becoming a habit today. "It mattered that it was mine," he said. "I didn't think it needed to be more." She nodded slowly. "Are you mad at her?" "No." "Are you mad at me?" "No." Susan exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. "Okay, because I'm proud and a little stunned, and I kind of want to show everyone." Carter smiled despite himself. "That tracks." They heard the front door open and close. Emma appeared in the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes darting between them like a witness entering a courtroom. "Hey," she said carefully. "Hey," Carter replied. Susan leaned back against the counter. "Your father had a surprise morning." Emma winced. "I didn't think it would blow up like that." Carter looked at her. Really looked. "You recorded me," he said calmly. "Yes." "You posted it." "Yes." "And you didn't ask." Emma swallowed. "No." Carter nodded once. "Okay." That was it. No raised voice. No lecture. No disappointment sharpened into a weapon. Emma blinked. "That's okay." "It's done," Carter said. "We'll talk about it. But not like this." Relief flooded her face. "I'm sorry, Dad. People should hear you." He smiled. Small but genuine. "That's kind of you." That evening, after dinner and homework and the familiar mess of family life, Carter retreated to the garage again. Not to sing, just to think. The phone buzzed in his pocket. Mike, yeah, Carter said when he answered. Man, Mike said laughing. You couldn't tell your own brother you had pipes like that? Carter leaned against the workbench. Didn't come up. Mike snorted. Mom's beside herself. Wants you to sing at Thanksgiving. I'm not singing at Thanksgiving. She's already planning. Carter closed his eyes briefly. Figures. But hey, Mike added, voice shifting. You okay? Carter looked around the garage. His space. His quiet. I am, he said. I just need to decide what comes next. Mike hummed. Careful. That's how trouble starts. Carter smiled faintly. Or how you choose it. He ended the call and stood there a moment longer, the echo of his own voice lingering in the rafters. The garage wasn't silent anymore. And Carter Jones was beginning to understand that some things, once heard, couldn't be taken back, only answered. Chapter 3, The House Reacts. By the time Friday evening arrived, the Jones household had developed a background hum that Carter could feel in his teeth. It wasn't noise exactly. It was attention. The kids' phones chimed more often. Susan's tablet buzzed during dinner prep. Even the landline, an artifact Carter had insisted on keeping, rang twice in one afternoon, both times from relatives who never called unless something was wrong or something was exciting. This was the latter. Carter noticed it all without commenting. He moved through the house the same way he always did. Steady, deliberate, useful. He chopped vegetables beside Susan, handed her spices without being asked, and nudged the dishwasher closed with his foot when it was left open. Susan watched him out of the corner of her eye. She loved this about him. The way he didn't spiral. The way he didn't perform even when the world suddenly seemed to want him to. But she also knew him well enough to recognize when he was thinking in layers, stacking thoughts carefully so none of them toppled. So, she said lightly, handing him a spoon. Your mother called again. Carter tasted the sauce. Added salt. I assume she wants me to sing. She wants you to stand near the piano while she sings, Susan corrected. She thinks that's a compromise. He huffed a quiet laugh. That's not a compromise. That's an ambush with harmony. Susan grinned. I told her you were unavailable. Thank you. You're welcome. She also said your Aunt Lorraine cried. Carter paused. About what? About how she never really knew you. He considered that. I brought potato salad to every reunion. Susan reached for his hand briefly, squeezed. You're doing fine. I know. And he did. Mostly. Dinner was spaghetti, cheap, filling, universally accepted. The kids gathered at the table with the practiced chaos of familiarity. Ethan, 12 and perpetually hungry, launched into a story about a science project that involved vinegar and a regrettable explosion. Emma sat quieter than usual, phone face down, eyes flicking toward her father every few seconds. Carter caught it and met her gaze. She looked away immediately. After dinner, Susan sent Ethan upstairs with instructions that included brushing his teeth, doing it properly, and not turning the bathroom into a science lab. He obeyed with dramatic suffering. Emma lingered. Can we talk? She asked. Carter nodded. Living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, space between them filled with unspoken things. Susan hovered near the doorway, pretending to organize mail while very clearly listening. Emma broke first. I didn't think people would care this much. Carter leaned back, folding his hands. What made you think they wouldn't? She shrugged. You're my dad. He smiled faintly. That's fair. She swallowed. Everyone at school is sharing it. Teachers too. Mrs. Alvarez asked if you'd sing at the spring assembly. Susan made a choking sound that she turned into a cough. Carter raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. Emma twisted her fingers together. Are you embarrassed? He answered without hesitation. No. Angry. No. Hurt. He thought just for a second. Surprised. She nodded, accepting that. I'm sorry I didn't ask. I know, he said. And we'll talk about that part. But not because I'm mad. She finally looked at him. Then why? Because someday, he said gently, you'll have something that's just yours, and I want you to understand what it costs to share it. Emma nodded slowly. Okay. Susan stepped in then, arms crossed loosely. For what it's worth, your father isn't the only one surprised. Emma blinked. You didn't know either? Susan laughed. Oh, I knew he sang. I did not know he could do that. Carter shot her a look. I told you it wasn't relevant. Susan smiled at him, soft and fond. It's relevant now. Later, after the kids were in bed and the house had settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs, Carter and Susan sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea growing cold between them. Susan broke the silence first. You could do something with this. Carter didn't respond immediately. I don't mean Hollywood, she added quickly. I mean, community stuff, charity events, the school fundraiser. People respond to you. They respond to novelty, he said. It fades. Susan studied him. You're not afraid. No. You're not tempted. He smiled. A little. She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. Okay. Then here's my question. He waited. What do you want? The question landed differently from the others that day. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't curious. It was grounded. Carter leaned back in his chair, eyes lifting to the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. I want my life, he said. The one we built. I want the kids to feel steady. I want you to keep chasing what you're chasing. I want the garage to still feel like mine. And the singing? Susan asked. He smiled then, slow and real. That's not going anywhere. Susan reached across the table and took his hand. Then we'll protect that. He squeezed back. Together. Upstairs, Emma lay in bed scrolling through comments she'd stopped reading hours ago. Praise. Amazement. Invitations she didn't know how to respond to. She locked her phone and stared at the ceiling. Her dad had always been strong. She'd known that. She just hadn't known how many ways that strength could sound. Down in the garage, untouched for the night, silence waited patiently. It wouldn't last forever. Chapter 4. Eyes on You. By Monday, Carter Jones had become a person people looked at twice. He noticed it first in the parking lot at work, where a woman he'd passed 100 times before slowed her steps to match his. You're Carter, right? She asked. Yes, ma'am. She smiled, pleased. Just wanted to say, you've got a gift. Carter thanked her, because that was what polite people did when someone handed them something they weren't sure they wanted to carry. Inside the building, the looks followed him. Not hostile, not invasive, just attentive. Like the world had discovered a new detail about a familiar object and couldn't stop seeing it. At his desk, an envelope sat where his keyboard should have been. Handwritten. Carter opened it carefully. Community Spring Fundraiser. We'd be honored if you'd consider performing. He folded the note once and placed it in his drawer without comment. By lunchtime, there were 3 more. At home, the attention pressed closer. Susan came in that evening with her blazer slung over one arm and a look that told him she'd already processed most of the day. You have fans, she said, kicking off her shoes. I have neighbors, Carter replied. She laughed. The PDA chair cornered me in the grocery store. That sounds dangerous. She wants to know if you'd sing at the school fundraiser. I will not sing at the school fundraiser. Susan raised an eyebrow. That's exactly what you said about Thanksgiving. He gave her a look. That remains a firm no. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. Noted. The kids reacted differently. Ethan was thrilled. He announced to his friends, loudly, repeatedly, that his dad was basically famous, and asked if that meant he could get a better phone. Emma was quieter. She didn't post anymore. She didn't comment much either. She watched the ripple spread and seemed to understand, maybe for the first time, that throwing a stone meant accepting where the waves landed. One afternoon, Carter found her sitting on the steps leading to the garage, earbuds in, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then shrugged. I didn't know people would want things from you, she said. He sat beside her. People always want things. They just didn't know what to ask me for before. She winced. I don't like that. Neither do I, he said evenly. But it's manageable. How? By deciding what's worth saying yes to. That seemed to settle her a little. The invitations kept coming. A charity dinner. A local radio station. A friend of a friend who knew a guy. Carter declined them all politely, without explanation. He didn't know anyone his reasons. Still, the pressure mounted, not from strangers but from familiarity. Mike called again. You know, his brother said, people don't get chances like this twice. Carter leaned against the kitchen counter, phone tucked between shoulder and ear as he rinsed a plate. I didn't ask for a first chance. Mike sighed. You always did this. Stayed just out of reach. I stayed where I was, Carter corrected. Same thing. After the call, Carter stood alone in the quiet kitchen, water running longer than necessary. Susan found him there. Too much? She asked. He nodded once. A little. She stepped closer, rested her head briefly against his shoulder. Then we slow it down. That night, Carter returned to the garage. He turned on the lights, closed the door, set his phone on the workbench face down, as if that alone could restore the old rules. He put on his playlist. The first song came on, and he didn't sing. He leaned back against the car, listening, feeling the absence like a held breath. The garage felt smaller somehow, less private. He shut the music off and sat in the silence. This, more than the attention, unsettled him. 2 days later, the knock came. It was a soft knock, respectful, the kind that expected an answer but wouldn't demand one. Carter opened the door to find Mrs. Alvarez, Emma's English teacher, standing on the porch with a hopeful smile and a clipboard clutched like armor. I won't take much of your time, she said quickly. Carter stepped outside, closing the door behind him. How can I help? She launched into it with practiced enthusiasm. Spring assembly, community spirit, students inspired by seeing adults pursue passions. I think it would mean a lot, she finished. Just one song. Carter considered her words, her intent. He didn't doubt her sincerity. I appreciate the thought, he said, but I'm not comfortable performing like that. Her smile dimmed but didn't vanish. I understand. Truly. I just thought I'd ask. That's fair, he said. Thank you for asking. After she left, Carter stood on the porch a moment longer, watching the street settle back into itself. He wasn't angry, but he was aware now that his quiet had become conspicuous. That evening, Susan found him in the garage again. Hood up, hands busy. "You haven't sung," she observed. He didn't look up. "No. Is that a choice?" she asked. "Or a reaction?" That got his attention. He set the wrench down and turned to face her. "I don't know yet." She stepped closer, careful not to crowd him. "You don't owe anyone anything. I know. But you owe yourself honesty." He nodded slowly. "That's the part I'm working on." Susan smiled softly. "Take your time." Later that night, long after the house had gone quiet, Carter returned to the garage alone. He turned the music back on. This time he sang. Not loud, not full, just enough to remind himself that the sound still belonged to him. Across town, the video continued to circulate, gathering momentum Carter could feel but not see, an undercurrent tugging gently, persistently. Eyes were on him now. The question wasn't whether he noticed. It was whether he would turn toward them or choose deliberately when and how to be seen. Chapter 5: The Offer. The offer arrived in the least dramatic way possible. Folded neatly, slipped under the windshield wiper of Carter's car, while he was inside the hardware store buying shop rags he didn't need. He noticed it only after he'd loaded the bags into the trunk and was already reaching for the driver's door. The paper fluttered slightly in the breeze, white against the dark glass. He sighed, the sound more amused than annoyed, and plucked it free. "We'd like to talk." No logo, no flourish, just a phone number and a name written in careful block letters. Lydia Monroe. Carter stood there a moment longer than necessary, rereading the note as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. He folded it once and slid it into his pocket, then drove home. Susan was already there when he arrived, shoes kicked off by the door, jacket draped over a chair like she'd meant to hang it up and gotten distracted halfway through. She looked up from the counter where she was scrolling through her phone, expression unreadable. "Before you say anything," she said, "I haven't agreed to anything." Carter raised an eyebrow. "That implies someone asked." She turned the screen toward him. An email, polite, enthusiastic, signed by Lydia Monroe. Carter reached into his pocket and pulled out the note. They stared at each other. "Well," Susan said finally, "that feels intentional." They sat at the kitchen table with the paper between them like evidence. "She wants to talk," Susan said. "Not perform, not commit, just talk." "That's how it starts," Carter replied mildly. Susan smiled. "You say that like you don't already know." "I do know," he said. "That's why I'm cautious." She nodded. "What are you thinking?" He considered his answer carefully. "I'm thinking I don't want this to become something that takes more than it gives." Susan leaned back in her chair. "Then you set the terms." He looked at her. "You make that sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But it's possible." The meeting took place 3 days later at a cafe that tried very hard to look accidental. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, the smell of coffee that had never met a percolator. Lydia Monroe was younger than Carter expected. Mid-30s, maybe, sharp eyes, comfortable posture. She shook his hand with confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "I appreciate you meeting me," she said. "Truly." Carter nodded. "I'm here to listen." She smiled at that. "That's what I heard." They sat, ordered coffee. Lydia waited until the server was out of earshot before speaking again. "I work with the Community Arts Council," she said. "We organize events, fundraisers, showcases, local talent." Carter didn't interrupt. "I saw the video," she continued. "So did a lot of people. What struck me wasn't just your voice, it was your presence. You're not chasing attention." "I'm actively avoiding it," Carter said. She laughed. "Yes, that too." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to make you famous. I'm here to ask if you'd consider singing at one event. A charity benefit. Low pressure. No cameras unless you say yes." Carter studied her face for signs of exaggeration. He found none. "One song," she added. "On your terms." Silence stretched between them. "What's the charity?" Carter asked. "Family Resource Center," Lydia replied. "Childcare assistance, counseling services, things that keep families steady." That landed. Carter exhaled slowly. "I don't sing publicly." "I know," Lydia said. "That's why I'm asking privately." He considered that too. "Let me be clear," he said. "I won't do this if it turns into something else." She nodded immediately. "Agreed. And I won't do it if it interferes with my family." "Understood. And if I say no at any point before, during, or after, that's the end of it." Lydia smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They shook hands again. This time, the gesture felt less like an introduction and more like a boundary drawn in ink. That night, Carter told Susan everything. She listened without interrupting, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone untouched. "So," she said when he finished, "what do you want to do?" "I want to say yes," he admitted. "Once." Susan smiled. "Then say yes, once." The fundraiser was held in a renovated warehouse downtown. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling. Folding chairs had been upgraded with cushions that didn't quite match. The stage was small, barely a step above the floor. Carter stood backstage, hands clasped loosely in front of him, breathing steady. Susan stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I am." She stepped closer. "You don't have to do this. I know. And you're not doing it for anyone else. I know that too." She smiled then, soft and proud. "Good." When his name was announced, the applause surprised him. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't wild. It was warm. Carter stepped into the light. He sang one song. He didn't embellish. He didn't grandstand. He sang the way he always had, grounded, honest, precise. The room leaned in. When it was over, the applause came again, louder this time. Carter nodded once, thanked them, and walked off stage. He felt lighter. Backstage, Lydia waited with a grin. "You did good." "I did what I said I'd do," Carter replied. She laughed. "Fair." The next morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. Complimentary. Interested. Carter deleted it without listening twice. That afternoon, another call. Another message. He listened this time. Radio station. Local. Evening show. Just a conversation. Carter stared at the phone after it ended, jaw tight. That evening, he stood in the garage with the door open, air cool against his skin. Susan joined him quietly. "They keep calling," he said. "I know," she replied. "Emma told me." He sighed. "Of course she did." Susan leaned against the workbench. "You don't have to answer." "I know. But you might want to." He turned to face her. "This is where it changes." She nodded. "Yes. This is where it stops being one thing." "Yes. And if I keep going, I don't know where it ends." Susan stepped closer, took his hands. "Then you decide where it ends." Carter looked around the garage. The car. The tools. The speakers. His sanctuary. "I need to be careful," he said. Susan smiled gently. "You always are." That night, Carter didn't sing. He stood in the garage, listening to the music, feeling the weight of choice settle around him. Not heavy, exactly, but solid. The offer had been made. What came next would cost something. And Carter Jones had never taken a step forward without knowing the price. Chapter 6, The Argument That Matters. The argument didn't start loud. It started the way most important things did in the Jones household. Quietly, after the kids were asleep, when the day had finally run out of places to hide. Susan stood at the sink, rinsing a mug that didn't need rinsing. Carter leaned against the counter behind her, arms folded, watching the water run. "They called again," he said. Susan didn't turn around. "Which they?" "Radio station." And Lydia texted. "Says there's interest beyond local now." That got her attention. She shut off the faucet and faced him. "Beyond local how?" Carter shrugged. She didn't specify, which is the problem. Susan studied his face, reading the careful neutrality there. "You sound irritated." "I'm not," he said. "I'm alert." She smiled faintly. "That's worse." He huffed a breath. "I don't like things expanding without my consent." Susan leaned back against the counter, arms crossing. "You did consent to the fundraiser." "I consented to one song, one night, one boundary. And you kept that boundary," she said. "You walked away." "Yes," he agreed. "And now everyone else wants to keep walking toward me." Susan nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's talk about what's underneath that." Carter looked at her. Really looked. "You think there's something underneath?" "I think there always is," she said. "Especially when you get this quiet." That landed harder than he expected. He pushed off the counter and began pacing the small kitchen. Steps measured. "I don't want our life to tilt." Susan frowned. "It's not tilting." "Not yet," he said. "But it could." She followed him with her eyes. "Because you sang?" "Because people are deciding things about me," he replied. "About us." Susan's voice softened. "No one is deciding anything unless we let them." He stopped pacing, turned to face her. "That's easy to say," he said. "You don't get recognized at the grocery store." Susan blinked. "Is that what this is about? Being seen?" "No," he said quickly, then paused. "Yes, and what comes with it?" She crossed the space between them. "Carter, look at me." He did. "You are not losing control," she said firmly. "You are not being swept away. You are a grown man who sang a song and discovered people noticed." His jaw tightened. "That's not the part that scares me." She waited. "What scares me," he said slowly, "is liking it." Susan's expression shifted, not to alarm, but to understanding. "You liked the fundraiser," she said. "I liked doing something that mattered," he corrected. "I liked using a thing I have to help people. I liked that it felt clean, honest. And I liked the way it felt to be good at something no one expected from me." Susan exhaled. "That's human." "It's dangerous," he said. "For who?" "For us," he replied immediately. That did it. Susan stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "You think us is fragile?" No, Carter said. I think I am. Silence stretched between them, taut and heavy. Susan folded her arms tighter. Explain. Carter dragged a hand through his hair. I've built my life carefully, intentionally. I chose stability. I chose you. I chose this family every day. And I'm happy. I am. I know, she said quietly. But this, he gestured vaguely. This feels like an alternate version of me knocking on the door. One I didn't explore. One I didn't need to. Susan's voice sharpened just a touch. Are you saying you regret your choices? No, he said immediately. I'm saying I respect their cost. That stopped her. Susan uncrossed her arms. Say that again. I respect their cost, Carter repeated. Everything meaningful costs something. Time, energy, tension. If I say yes to this even a little, I'm saying no to something else. And I don't want to pretend otherwise. Susan leaned against the counter again, processing. You're afraid you'll resent the trade. Yes. She nodded slowly. That's fair. He looked at her, surprised. It is. Yes, she said. But you're missing something. He waited. You're acting like the cost is paid all at once, she said. Like one yes undoes everything. Carter frowned. Doesn't it? No, Susan said firmly. It only does if you stop choosing. She stepped closer again, placing a hand on his chest. You didn't marry me once, she said. You marry me every day. You didn't choose this family once. You choose it constantly. Carter swallowed. And if you decide, she continued, that singing publicly, sometimes on your terms, is worth a small cost, that doesn't mean you're abandoning us. It means you're trusting us to hold the rest. He closed his eyes briefly. I don't want you carrying more. Susan smiled sadly. We already carry each other. That's not new. He opened his eyes. What if it grows? Then we talk, she said. We argue. We recalibrate. Like we always do. He searched her face for doubt. Found none. You'd really be okay, he asked. If I explored this a little? Susan tilted her head. Would you still be home for dinner? Yes. Would you still be in the garage on Saturdays pretending to work on a car that doesn't need it? He almost smiled. Absolutely. Would you still show up for the kids the way you always have? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Susan nodded. Then I'm okay. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But, she added. He braced himself. But the moment this stops feeling like a choice, she said. We stop. Carter nodded. Agreed. And the moment it stops serving our family, she continued. We stop. Agreed. And, Susan said, her mouth curving into a familiar smile, the moment you start turning into someone who needs applause more than peace. I stop myself, he finished. She laughed softly. I was going to say I stop you. He reached for her hands. That too. They stood there a moment, kitchen quiet around them, the argument settling into something solid and shared. Later, Carter went out to the garage. This time, he didn't turn the music on right away. He sat on the workbench, elbows on his knees, thinking about alternate versions of himself. The roads not taken. The doors he'd closed gently and without regret. He didn't believe in destiny. He believed in decisions. Finally, he turned on the speakers. The song that came on was louder than he'd planned. Sharper. Defiant. He smiled to himself. He sang, not to escape, not to impress, but to remind himself why he'd chosen this life in the first place. Inside the house, Susan listened from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, smiling. This was the fight that mattered. And it hadn't broken them. It had clarified everything. Chapter 7. The stage. The stage was smaller than Carter expected. Not physically, though it wasn't much more than a raised platform with a microphone stand, but conceptually. It didn't loom. It didn't threaten. It simply existed, waiting to be used. That realization surprised him. The event was a week after the argument, deliberately scheduled on a Thursday evening because Carter had insisted on it. No weekends. No creeping into family time. Lydia had agreed without hesitation, which had gone a long way toward convincing him this was still what she claimed it was. The choice, backstage or what passed for backstage, was a curtained-off corner with folding chairs and a table of bottled water. Carter sat with his elbows on his knees, posture relaxed, breathing even. Susan stood nearby, scrolling through her phone without really looking at it. Emma hovered at the edge of the curtain, peeking out at the crowd like it might jump her if she stared too long. It's full, she whispered. Carter smiled. That tends to happen when people show up. She shot him a look. You know what I mean? I do, he said gently. And it's fine. She hesitated. I didn't post anything this time. I know, he said. Thank you. Emma nodded, relief flickering across her face. You nervous? He considered the question honestly. No, she blinked. At all. Not like you mean, he said. I'm alert. Same as always. Susan finally looked up. That might be your most unsettling trait. He smiled at her. I've been told. Lydia appeared then, clipboard in hand, efficient but not frantic. 5 minutes, she said. No changes. No surprises. Carter stood. Good. She hesitated, then added, "There are a few people here from outside the community. Observers. They know they're not here to pitch." Carter met her gaze. "And if they forget?" She smiled. "They'll be reminded." That was enough. When his name was announced, the applause was louder than before. Not explosive, but sustained. Expectant. Carter stepped out from behind the curtain and onto the stage. The lights weren't blinding. They were warm. The crowd wasn't faceless. He could see expressions, curiosity, anticipation, something like affection from people who felt they knew him because they'd seen 30 seconds of his life. He adjusted the microphone once. Not because it needed it, but because it gave his hands something to do. "This is the part," he said into the mic, voice calm, "where I'm supposed to say something charming." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. "I don't have that," he continued, "but I appreciate you being here." More laughter, softer this time. He took a breath. "I sing because it helps me remember who I am," he said. "That's it. No explanation. No apology." The band behind him, minimal, restrained, found the opening notes. Carter closed his eyes and sang. He didn't think about the room. He didn't think about the people watching, or the phones he knew were out despite requests otherwise. He thought about the garage, about grease-stained concrete and half-closed doors and the quiet satisfaction of choosing the same life over and over again. His voice carried, not louder than before, but fuller, more deliberate. When the last note faded, there was a moment, just one, of perfect stillness. Then the room erupted. Carter opened his eyes and smiled, just a little, and nodded once in acknowledgement before stepping back from the microphone. Backstage, Emma launched herself at him. "That was insane," she said into his shoulder. Dad, you were incredible." He hugged her back. "Thank you." Susan joined them, her eyes bright. She didn't say anything at first, just took his face in her hands and kissed him, quick and sure. "I love you," she said. "I know," he replied. "I love you too." Lydia approached, respectful, careful not to intrude. "You did exactly what you said you would," she said. "People are asking questions." Carter nodded. "They will. And your answer, for tonight," he said, "is thank you and good night." She smiled. "That's what I thought." They left before the crowd could reorganize itself around him. No lingering, no encore. Carter held Susan's hand as they walked to the car, Emma trailing behind them, buzzing with energy. At home, the house greeted them like it always did, quiet, familiar, unchanged. Carter went to the garage alone. He didn't turn the lights on right away. He stood in the doorway, listening to the echo of the night still humming in his chest. This had been different from the fundraiser. Bigger. Not dangerous yet, but closer to the line. He turned on the light and leaned against the workbench, phone buzzing in his pocket. Messages, missed calls, opportunities forming faster than he liked. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, he pulled up his playlist. The song he selected wasn't accidental. The opening chords filled the garage, sharp and unapologetic. Carter smiled to himself. This wasn't about proving anything. Not to them, not to himself. It was about remembering the cost and choosing anyway. Inside the house, Susan watched the garage light glow through the window and didn't interrupt. Some stages were meant to be shared. Others were meant to be reclaimed. Carter lifted his head and sang, voice steady, grounded, certain. The next choice was coming. And this time he was ready for it. Chapter 8. The price. The venue wasn't a warehouse this time. It was a theater, small, historic, the kind with velvet curtains and polished wood that carried sound the way a good room should. The kind that remembered voices long after they were gone. Carter stood in the wings, hands loose at his sides, breathing slow. He wasn't nervous. He hadn't been nervous in weeks. What he felt now was weight. Not fear, not excitement, but the gravity of a moment that mattered. This wasn't an accident anymore. This wasn't a video or a favor or a single yes carefully circled on a calendar. This was a choice. The calls had multiplied after the last show. The requests had sharpened, professional now, less friendly. Conversations that began with praise ended with expectations. Timelines, possibilities, language that assumed availability. Carter had listened. He always listened. And then, for the first time since this all began, he had asked for something in return. One song. No interviews. No announcements. No next steps. Just one song delivered exactly the way he chose. The organizers had hesitated. They always did when control entered the room. But they agreed. Susan stood just behind him, one hand resting lightly between his shoulder blades. Emma was there too, quieter than she'd ever been, the weight of understanding settling into her bones. "You don't have to prove anything," Susan said softly. "I know," Carter replied. Emma swallowed. "Are you scared?" He turned and smiled at her, warm and steady. "No, I'm clear." That seemed to reassure her more than bravado ever could. The announcer's voice carried through the curtain, measured and respectful. Carter's name followed, not inflated, not undersold, just stated. The applause rose. It was bigger than before, broader, less personal. Carter stepped forward anyway. The lights found him immediately. Not harsh. Intentional. The band behind him was minimal. Guitar, bass, drums, nothing that would hide him or prop him up. He adjusted the microphone once. The room settled. Carter didn't speak right away. He let the silence do its work. Let the audience lean in without being asked. "This is the only song I'm going to sing tonight," he said. A murmur rippled through the seats. "It's not because I don't have more," he continued. "It's because some things are meant to be chosen, not consumed." Silence again. Deeper now. "This song," he said, "is about deciding what your life costs and paying it willingly." He nodded to the band. The opening chords of The Price cut cleanly through the air. Carter didn't close his eyes this time. He sang with intention, not louder, not flashier, but anchored. Every note placed, every phrase earned. The song wasn't a performance. It was a declaration. He thought of mornings rushing out the door, of late-night talks at the kitchen table, of the garage and its rules and the quiet joy of something that didn't ask for witnesses. He thought of Susan, brilliant and relentless and steady beside him, of Emma learning what power meant, of Ethan, still young enough to believe strength was something you showed with your chest out and your voice raised. Carter knew better. Strength was what you held onto when something shiny tried to pull it from your hands. He sang the final note and let it fall exactly where it belonged. The applause came fast and loud and long. Carter accepted it the way he accepted compliments everywhere else in his life, with gratitude, not hunger. He nodded once and walked off stage. Backstage was chaos held together by professionalism. People moved quickly, voices overlapping, plans forming in the air like weather. Lydia found him first. That was, she stopped herself, exhaled. That was exactly what it needed to be. Carter nodded. "Thank you. There are people here," she said carefully. "People who want to talk." "I know," he replied. Susan appeared at his side, fingers threading through his. "We're heading home." Lydia searched his face. "Is that final?" Carter met her gaze. "It is." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled. Genuine, unforced. "You know," she said, "most people would be afraid to walk away from this." "I'm not walking away," Carter said. "I'm standing still." She laughed softly. "Fair enough." They left before the theater could reorganize itself around him, before the energy could tilt from appreciation to acquisition. The drive home was quiet. Emma stared out the window, thoughtful. "You sounded different tonight." Carter glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "How so?" "Like you weren't hoping anything would happen next." Susan smiled. At home, the house wrapped around them like it always had, safe, familiar, unchanged by applause or possibility. Carter went to the garage one last time that night. He turned on the lights, closed the door, let the silence settle. He didn't put on music. He didn't need to. The sound he wanted was already there, in his chest, in his bones, in the life he had chosen again and again without regret. Susan watched from the doorway, arms crossed loosely, content to let the moment be his. "You okay?" she asked. Carter nodded. "Better than okay." He reached for the light switch, paused, then turned to her. "Thank you," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For trusting me," he replied. "And for stopping me if I ever forget." Susan smiled, soft and sure. "That's the deal." Carter flipped the switch. The garage went dark. The song was over. The choice remained. And Carter Jones went inside, exactly where he belonged. Chapter 9. After the echo, life didn't change all at once. That surprised Carter more than anything else. He'd half expected the morning after the theater to feel different, to wake up and find the world rearranged around him, louder or sharper or demanding something he hadn't agreed to give. Instead, the alarm went off at the same time. The coffee maker gurgled in its familiar, slightly irritated way. Susan moved through the kitchen in socked feet, already mentally halfway into her day. Carter watched her for a moment before speaking. "Morning," he said. She smiled without looking up. "Morning. Normal." Emma came down late, hair half damp, backpack slung over one shoulder. Ethan followed, arguing with gravity and cereal at the same time. The house filled with the usual soundtrack of forks clinking and someone forgetting where they left their shoes. No applause. No expectations. Just life. At work, the attention softened. A few people stopped him to say they'd heard about the show. One asked if he'd sing again sometime. Carter smiled and said, "Probably not," in a way that made it clear the answer wasn't a challenge. They nodded, accepted it. That too surprised him. The calls slowed. The messages stopped. Lydia sent one final text that read simply, "You did good. Thank you." Carter replied with the same. He didn't feel like he'd walked away from something. He felt like he'd closed a door gently, the way you did when you respected what was on the other side but didn't intend to live there. The garage reclaimed its rhythm. Saturday morning found Carter out there with the door half open, sunlight cutting across the concrete floor. The car hood was up again, this time for something real, though he took his time with it anyway. The speakers hummed quietly, background more than centerpiece. Susan stepped in, coffee mug in hand, wearing one of his old shirts like it had always belonged to her. Am I trespassing? She asked. He glanced up, smiling. Depends. You willing to work? She raised the mug. Supervising. He considered that. I'll allow it. She leaned against the workbench, watching him for a moment. You seem lighter. I feel lighter, he said. Like I set something down. Susan nodded. I was wondering if you'd miss it. He wiped his hands on a rag. I don't miss the attention. I don't miss the expectation. And the singing? She asked. He paused, then smiled. That was never going anywhere. As if summoned, Emma appeared in the doorway, phone conspicuously absent from her hand. Can I listen? She asked. Carter looked at her, really looked, at the young woman she was becoming, at the weight she now understood a little better. Sure, he said. But if you come in, you help. She grinned. Worth it. Later that afternoon, with Ethan begrudgingly holding a flashlight and Susan passing commentary from her folding chair, Carter sang while he worked. Not for an audience, not for effect, just because the song fit the moment. His voice filled the garage, warm and unguarded. The sound echoed off walls that had never betrayed him. Susan closed her eyes and listened. She'd always known the shape of his strength, the steadiness, the restraint, the way he chose commitment over noise. What she understood now, more deeply, was the discipline behind it. The awareness, the choice made daily and without resentment. Carter finished the song and exhaled, satisfied. Emma clapped once. Still really good, she said. He smiled at her. Practice. That night, after the kids were in bed and the house had settled into its familiar quiet, Carter and Susan sat on the back porch with the lights off, watching the stars struggle against the glow of the neighborhood. You know, Susan said, most people would have chased that. Carter leaned back in his chair. I know. Any regrets? He didn't answer right away. No, he said finally. Just gratitude. For what? For knowing what matters to me, he said. And for having the courage to stop when I reached it. Susan reached for his hand. You didn't stop singing. No, he agreed. I just stopped selling it. She smiled, squeezed his fingers. Good. Inside, the garage stood quiet, patient, ready. It would hear his voice again soon. Loud or soft, joyful or tired, always honest. Carter Jones had learned something he'd never put into words before. That some gifts weren't meant to be shared with the world. Not because the world didn't deserve them, but because choosing where to give yourself was the truest kind of strength. His life was a choice, and every day, in 100 small, steady ways, he chose it. Chapter 10, What Remains. The garage changed without announcing itself. No ceremony, no marker in time. Just a subtle shift that Carter noticed one morning when he realized he no longer thought of it as a place to hide. It was still his. That hadn't changed. The rules still applied, enter at your own risk, work if you cross the threshold. But the space had loosened around the edges. The door stayed open more often. The music played a little louder. Sometimes, when the mood struck, Carter sang before he picked up a tool instead of after. It wasn't an invitation. It was an acceptance. Spring deepened into something warmer. School events came and went. Susan's schedule surged and receded like tidewater, demanding more of her some weeks and granting mercy on others. Carter adjusted where needed, not because he had to, but because he'd always believed that partnership was less about balance and more about awareness. They moved through their days with the quiet competence that came from practice. At dinner one night, Ethan announced that his class was doing a talent reflection assignment. What's that? Susan asked, spearing a piece of broccoli. We have to talk about someone we know who's really good at something, Ethan said, and what it costs them to be good at it. Carter paused mid-bite. Susan's eyes flicked to him, amused. And who are you choosing? She asked. Ethan shrugged. Probably Dad. Carter raised an eyebrow. That so? Well, Ethan continued, oblivious to the weight of the words, you're good at a lot of stuff. Fixing things. Being calm. Singing. Carter smiled faintly. And what do you think it costs? Ethan thought about it. Time. And not doing other things. Carter nodded. That's right. Emma watched the exchange quietly, something thoughtful settling behind her eyes. She'd grown quieter in recent months, not withdrawn, just more deliberate. She chose her words more carefully now. So did her silences. Later that evening, she found Carter in the garage, sitting on a stool with a guitar he hadn't touched in years resting across his lap. I didn't know you played, she said. I don't, he replied. I know a few chords. She sat on the workbench. That's still playing. He smiled. Fair. She hesitated, then said, people at school still ask about you sometimes. I imagine they do. I don't mind, she added quickly. I don't post about you anymore. Carter looked up at her. That wasn't a rule. I know, she said. It's a choice. That mattered more than she realized. On a Thursday evening not long after, Carter got a call from an unfamiliar number. He let it go to voicemail out of habit, then checked the message later out of courtesy. It was brief, respectful. A local veterans event looking for someone to sing the national anthem. No press, no promotion, no strings. Carter listened once, then again, That night, he brought it up at the kitchen table. I got a request, he said. Susan looked up from her laptop. What kind? One song, he said. Very specific, very contained. She studied him. And, I want to do it, he said. Because I want to, not because I feel pulled. Susan smiled. Then do it. The event came and went without fanfare. Carter sang. He shook hands. He came home in time to tuck Ethan into bed and listen to Emma talk about college possibilities she pretended not to care about yet. The garage light stayed on late that night. Carter sang afterward. Not the anthem, not anything defiant or declarative. Just something familiar. Something that fit the quiet hum of a house at rest. Susan listened from the doorway, the way she sometimes did. Not watching, just present. You know, she said, breaking the silence gently. This works because you don't need it. He nodded. That's how I knew it was safe. She smiled. You always did have good instincts. He turned the volume down and looked at her. So do you. Summer edged closer. Windows stayed open. The house breathed differently. The garage door stayed up more often than not. A line of demarcation softened into suggestion. Sometimes neighbors paused. Sometimes they waved. Sometimes they listened. Carter didn't mind. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the air turned gold, Susan joined him in the garage with 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed one to him and leaned against the car. Do you ever wonder? She asked. What would have happened if you'd gone all in? He considered the question honestly, without defensiveness or regret. I know what would have happened, he said. I would have gained something, and I would have lost something else. Susan nodded. And this way, he said. I get to keep choosing. She smiled, lifted her glass. To choosing. He clinked his against hers. To knowing the price. The music shifted on its own, the playlist wandering into something older, rougher around the edges. Carter recognized the opening immediately. He smiled, not because of the song, but because of what it no longer demanded from him. He sang anyway, not loudly, not for effect, just because the day had earned it. Inside, the house held steady. Upstairs, his children slept, secure in the quiet assurance that strength didn't have to announce itself to be real, that love didn't have to compete to be chosen, that some people fought their battles by knowing when not to fight at all. Carter Jones finished the song and let the last note fade naturally, unforced. He turned off the speakers. The garage returned to its familiar hush. Not empty, not expectant, just complete. He closed the door partway, left the light on low, and went inside to the life he'd built with intention, patience, and care. His life was still a choice, and tomorrow, like every day before it, he would choose it again.